What's up everyone? In this last tutorial on the Twetch SDK, we're going to review the read API, how to authenticate, do various queries to get different stats about Twetch, and then at the end, I'll show you guys how to build a custom filtered Twetch client where you can charge custom like amounts. Let's get into it. To get started making read queries against Twetch, we'll first need to authenticate with the GraphIQL endpoint. So the first thing we'll do is authenticate with our Twetch instance and then log that to the console. So let me go ahead and copy this code here, and then I'll open VS Code. And from the last tutorial, you should have Twetch installed and then know how to implement an instance. So here, we're just going to create an async function. Since we're making an API call, we'll call it auth. And I'll paste that code in, and then we want to log this to the console. And let's call our method auth. Open it up node, I'll just run node query, and then this is our token. So let me copy this. Alright, and then I'm going to open up this endpoint here, which we have. So I have this zoomed in and this screen's a little funky, but you'll want to enable this headers tab. And then notice in the documentation we need bearer, space, and then the token. So I'll write bearer. Oh, I need quotes. So bearer, space, and then paste the token. Okay, so now I should be good to go to make some queries. So let's do some sample ones. So you'll notice here we've got preset queries that we can use. So all branches. So that would give us exposure to all the branches that have been done on Twetch. All likes, all posts. So for example, if I wanted to just do post, all posts, total count. If I wanted to run that query, I could just hit play here, and then you can see that gives it to us. So it's about 300,000 total posts. If I wanted branches, I could do the same thing. All branches, total count, run that query, about 72,000, right? So you can do more things here. So instead of just getting the total count, you could do something like, let's go to users. So again, I could do all count users, 8,000, about 8,100. So in these users, I can do some additional filtering. In general, when we're making these type of test queries, we should do first 10 or something like that in order to get the first few records. That way we're not making huge open queries against the database that could have performance implications. So I'm going to keep that ticked for making these sample queries. If we want to get some additional properties about these users, we're going to want to click into these nodes. Let me close this headers thing and let's zoom in. So I'll expand the nodes, and you can see we have different fields for the users. So I could do their description, the earned. The earned calc would be how much they've earned on Twetch, which is the amount that displays on your profile. So I'll check that and get their user ID and their name. So let's run this. So we should see the top 10, the first 10 users, so by user number. So this is not top earned, but just the first 10 users on Twetch. So I'll hit play. And you can see here, so we get user ID 1, which is Harry, and he's earned about 304 bucks. And if we keep going down the line, we can see, of course, the frog, number 4, he's earned the most, about $1,000. So that's how these queries work. But we can also get some additional detail to drill down. So I can do the amount of times they've branched. Right, so I can click this. So you can see how many branches they've done. Again, the frog, he seems to be the most active, about 5,000 of them. I can also do, I just closed that one. I think there's likes here. Yep, likes by user ID, and I could do the total count. So you can see about 1,900, 2,000. Frog is very generous, almost 19,000 likes he's given out. So this likes by user ID means how many this user has actually liked, not how many they received. We'll show how to do that though as this tutorial moves forward. So now let's try to implement some of these queries in JavaScript code. So one thing, the first one we'll do is something that people seem to be interested in, which is how many branches and likes that they've given out. So let's actually do these queries here because we're going to need to copy this into our code. So let me close this. Let's start with the all branches. So I want to expand this out, close that, and I still want total count, but I want to use this filter here. And then I want to go down to user ID and say equal to. This way I can specify a user number. So I'll say mine, which is 145, hit play, and I've branched other people's posts 272 times. Now I can leave this and then expand the likes and run the same query. So I will tick the total count, and then I want to filter by user ID equal to, and in here I'll type 145, and I've liked 261 posts. Alright, so back out to the GitHub, we can see a sample query here, so I can leverage this in my JavaScript code. So let's open this up. I don't need this auth method anymore. Let's implement an async function. We'll call it likes and branches, and I want to specify a user ID just like I did in the query. And then let's post this. Let me tab this over. All right, and let's log the response so we can see what that looks like. All right, back out here, I do not need these. Actually, that's optional if you want to name your query, but I'll just copy this. So all I have to do is simply copy it into this template string here. So notice the backticks. Template strings are very powerful for this use case. So I could run this, but you can see here that it's hard coded to my user ID. I want to grab what we specify in the method. So I'll delete this, and then I'll do user ID, and then I'll do the same thing here. Alright, and now let's run this. And here I can specify, say, 145 again. Let's clear that out, and I'll run node query. And you see that gives us a JSON object with the same stats that we got here. The next query I'm going to want to run is to get the Twetches that I've actually made on the platform. So to do so, I'll start in all posts. I want first 10 so that I don't do a query for all Twetches. And I'm going to want to filter on my user ID. So I'll scroll down here, user ID equal to 145. But from here, I need to specify which fields in the post that I actually want. So to do so, I click the nodes drop down, and I want B content because that'll be the actual content of the Twetch. I want to get the number of likes, the number of branches, how many times people replied to me, and then the transaction, which is the Bitcoin transaction ID. So if I run this, you can see this is what displays here. So this is my very first Twetch. Got 1 like, no branches because those weren't implemented at the time, and then you can see the transaction ID there. Now let's implement a method that gets all the Twetches that we've made. So to do so, I'll start with all posts. I want the first 10. I'll filter by my user ID equal to, let me scroll over, 145. But now I need to specify what fields I actually want returned in the query. So I'm going to want B content, which is the content of the Twetch. I will want the number of likes it received, the number of branches, the number of replies, and then the Bitcoin transaction ID. So if I run this, you can see I get the first Twetch I ever made, which is just hello. I got 1 like, and there's the transaction ID. So now let's implement this in JavaScript. So I'll comment that. I want an async function, user post. I want to specify a user ID. And then we can write let response equals await twetch.query. And then I want my template string. And I can just copy this. I don't need these. These are optional, as I mentioned. Copy that, and then paste. All right. Now I can log this response, but you'll notice when I do this, it doesn't really give us what we want. So I just call, oops, I need to do the template string here. User post 145. All right, so you notice here, this kind of gives us garbage. So we're going to need to parse that response out. So we're going to need to drill down into all posts and then nodes to get the array, and then iterate through this to really get the content that we desire. So I can delete this. Let's do let post equals response dot all post dot nodes. So this is going to give us access to this nodes array, because we're saying dot all post dot nodes. Now we want a for loop. Less than post dot length plus plus. And now I can log out some of the stuff to the console. So I'll say post.I be content. So now I can reference the actual fields that I got from the query. Console.log post.I.num likes. And then we can also do the transaction ID. All right, now let's run this. So you can see it logged these out. This isn't a great format, but you can, I hope the point comes across of how this works. The next query I want to implement is how we can filter on content of Twetches. So back out to the graph IQL query. Let's start with all posts again. I still want the first 10, but instead of filtering on user IDs, I'm going to want to filter on the B content field. And what I can do is includes. So this will just kind of be like a contains, right? So this means that if the Twetch post had this value in it, then it'll show. If I do YOUT, that'll get YouTube ones. And the reason I'm posting that, because sometimes it shortens the URLs where it puts a period afterwards. So this is just a simple way for us to get that. And then just as I did before, I'm going to want to expand the nodes. And this time I'll just get content and the transaction. So if I run this, this should show us the first 10 Twetch posts that had YouTube links. And you see what I'm talking about with how the URL gets shortened here. All right, so let me copy this and then we'll implement a method for it. All right, so I can comment this out and we'll do a new function. We'll call it filtered post, and then we can specify a custom value. And now we'll do let response equals await twetch.query template strings again, and then I post it. So instead of this hard coding it, I want it to come from the method, so I could just say value. And we'll need to do kind of the same looping, so I can copy this code and then paste it here. I'm not getting likes, so I'll exclude that. And this should work. So now I want to call filtered post, and then I want, so this should get us the first 10 posts, just like the query we ran here. So let's clear this out, node query, and it gives us the same kind of output. This would be useful if you were creating a custom filtered Twetch client, say of YouTube curated links, and maybe the top is the most curated post that has the most likes or something like that. The next one I want to show off is how many likes and branches or replies that a user has received. So while getting the amount that they've given out, is trivial, and I showed that earlier. I want to show how many they've gotten in total. Now to do that, we're going to have to do some looping, so you can't do that actually using this tool by itself. So I'm going to want to start with user by ID, and I'll filter on mine just to start with. And now I'm going to want to drill down into the post detail. So I'll do post by user ID, and then I'll expand this node. So I don't want any content type fields. I'm looking for engagement here. So I want number of likes, branches, and reply count. I also want to add name to this query so that I can reference it when we implement it. All right, so now let's go back into JavaScript code and let's build a function. So luckily I can copy and leverage some of the code from one I did earlier. So I'll paste that, and I want to call this one engagement per user. And I want to replace this query here. All right, and fix the template string. Okay. So here I'm going to need to parse this response differently. So instead of all posts, I'm going to need to drill down to user by ID, then post by user ID. So we'll do user by ID dot post by user ID. So that'll give us access to the nodes, which has our fields. Let me grab the username. So I'll just simply say response dot user by ID dot name. And when we iterate through here, I'm going to need to tally up the stats on this. So I'll say let likes equals 0, replies equals 0, and branches equals 0. And then we can delete this out. So I need to increment, since I'm looping through each of the posts, I'm going to need to increment their like, branch, and reply counts. So I'll do likes plus equals post num likes, and then it's the same for the branches. Num branches, and then replies plus equals post I dot reply count. So this is summing all that up. Now let's write a nice message to the console. So we'll say log, and then we'll use template strings. I can say you, and then do the user ID since it's passed in, and then space the name. So that'll be the first line that prints, and then let's show the number of likes. Total likes received. Total branches received. And total replies. Okay, so when I run this method for a particular user ID, it's going to iterate through all their posts and tally up the likes, branches, replies, and write all that to the console. And I'm going to run it for myself. So this is going to take a while since I have about 1,300 Twetches. Let's do node query. And the reason it takes a while because it's doing that for loop through each of those and counting up all the stats that it's received. And you see I got a weird output here because I did not extract the number out. So to fix that, all I need to do is parse int on each of these whenever I add it up. And that's just going to grab the integer value of each of these fields. Okay, let's run this again. So this should be the proper output. All right, so we can see here I've received almost 1,600 total likes, 442 branches, and 642 replies. So that's a lot. If you tally up some of the founders, I'm sure they have more than this, but I think it's pretty interesting. I'm not going to go through that because I want you guys to kind of play around with this yourselves. But always make sure you have best practice, because you don't want to be running these types of open queries just willy-nilly. So the last part I want to show off is an actual custom filtered Twetch client that uses some of these techniques that I just reviewed here. So I have as one page HTML file out here. It's simply called Old School Twetch. So what I've been doing, maybe you guys have noticed this, is I've been posting to Twetch recently with a $ OSG, and I'm using that filtered technique that I showed when we did for the YouTube videos to display only Twetches on this HTML page that have that $ tag on it. So if you notice here, I just got lots of HTML code. I'm not going to explain it all, but it's probably best that I just show what this looks like. So because I'm using invisible money button for this, I'm going to need to run an simple express server that allows me to pull this page up. So just to review that, I'll put this code out for you guys, but all of this is doing is just serving my HTML page on this port. So if I open this up, I can go to localhost 9001, and here's my client. So I have a simple way where people can post, and then the ability for people to sort based off most recent or likes, and then it just shows these Twetches, and I also have a hyperlink out to my user number if I need it. So that's kind of the feel for this client. Let's go back into the code and let's just talk through what it's doing. So if I go down to the scripts, what we do here is I have a post query method, so you can see this is very similar to what we did, and I'm doing an order by. So just based off the option they choose, it'll order by the amount of likes or by the time it was created. And then you can see this is very similar to a query that we implemented. So notice this includes, instead of doing a YouTube one, I'm doing this $ OSG, and then I'm putting my order by here. I'm only getting the first 10 because I don't want to run it wide open, but I could easily get rid of that. And then you see my nodes here. I'm getting the content, transaction, the number of likes, so I can show it, as you can see here with the heart signs, if I liked it or not. So this you liked, it's good, because if you're the one that's logged in, it won't allow me to like it again. So that's a nice feature, that I can add these click listeners to the heart controls if I did not like it or not. So like if I click this, it doesn't do anything, right? I'm getting the money button user ID and the user who actually posted it, as you can see here. So I'm gonna put this out there for you guys to kind of play around with. But you'll see here again similar techniques. I'm getting the nodes, and then I'm iterating through each of those posts. Notice here I'm trimming the end, and that's because I don't want to show the $ OSG for every time. And then I'm simply adding the content out there. So I'm getting the post with the hyperlink, its user ID, and then you can see here if I liked it, then I'm adding some detail to it. A cool thing here is because of the transaction IDs of Bitcoin, I can use them as my identifier for those heart controls. So you can see I'm adding that as the ID with the islarge heart icon. And then I'm adding the money button user ID, and I'll get into why I'm doing that to the actual control. So I don't want to walk through all of this because it's a decent amount of code. But down at the end here, I have two functions. So I have a like. So what it's going to do is get that control object. It's going to increment the like count +1. And then it's going to build an invisible money button with the Twetch like function and then call that. Same thing for posting. It's going to automatically append this $ tag. That way users don't have to type it when they're using this. And then we're going to put like a loading control onto the screen, and then build the invisible money button with the post action and send it off. So scrolling back up, I'll put the documentation to the invisible money button. Again, I don't want to go through that because it's really a Twetch tutorial, but it's pretty easy, similar to money button, but I just want to talk through how we're building it out. So in case they post, I'm passing in the content. This should be familiar from the previous tutorials where we like and post is different fields for the object. So post transaction, I just pass the transaction ID, and the content is the actual content. And then there's also a sample page that Harry created that's just pretty cool, that just allows you to post to Twetch using the money button on an HTML page. So I leverage that in my code here. So we're going to build it with the action that we pass and the object. And then this is just a standard Twetch op return output that actually has the data. So one cool thing here, and the purpose of that client identifier, is that if you build a Twetch client, you take cuts, you get their 10%. You can add an additional cut here and pass that along to the poster. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm saying give me an additional 1,000 Satoshis per action. And then if there's a like, I'm adding a custom amount. So not only will it do the Twetch like, that's 4 cents, but I'm adding an additional 20,000 Satoshis. So likes are around 10 cents on this platform. And this could be whatever you like. So it really just gives you flexibility with the outputs to be able to charge whatever you want on your own platform, even though this is still going to Twetch at the end of the day. So let's demo this. So if I come up here, the idea is that old school gaming type material should be discussed here, but I'm just going to do testing for the purposes of this. I'll go ahead and post, and you can see I get a loading dialog here. So it takes some time because I'm making API calls to both money button and to Twetch, but you see it refreshed and put it here. And I can also give that a like. So it goes to myself, but to other people, it would obviously go to them. And I have a hyperlink out here that I can just click and it'll take me directly to my profile. You see the like hasn't gone through because it does take a little bit of time, as I said. But if I refresh, eventually it'll show up. I can sort based off the number of likes, so you can see what's getting the most engagement. So you can see that's 2111. And if I refresh my profile here, now that popped up. So a cool thing with this is it's just one HTML page, but because I'm using invisible money button, if someone else were to use this, they'd be prompted to log in with it. So I don't have to actually implement any logins, which is very cool. And I think another cool benefit of this is I'm running this on localhost right now, but I could also run this from the chain if I wanted to. So I have a Bitcoin files link out here. So I actually uploaded the same client out here. So notice if I run this likes, I get the same output. Now, if I try to post, it's not going to work, but I can show you guys how you make that happen. So if you go to money button and then your apps. So the reason this app works, it's called Acorns, is just running on localhost. Let me zoom in. But if I were to change this URL to the Bitcoin files link, now, and make sure that refreshed. So now I should be able to post from here. And it'll take a bit. But you see, I didn't get any errors, even though I changed the domain, and then you see that worked. So if I go out to my user, and that posted. So I ran a custom filtered Twetch client without a server, completely off the chain, and I could profit from this if other people decided to use this. So I hope that was informational to you guys. This is the last Twetch tutorial I'm going to do, but I hope it kind of gives you guidance on building with the SDK, which I think is pretty great. So shout out to Harry, Randy, Frog, all those guys. And I'll continue making tutorials, so let me know feedback on this one and what you guys would like to see in the future. All right, see you guys in the next one.